before we begin, allow me to introduce our distinguished guests from this evening. Dr. Ori Goldberg from the Government School at the Reichman University. Mohammad Najib joining us from Ramallah, a Palestinian security analyst, and a prominent Israeli speaker and influencer, Hananya Naftali, here in our Tel Aviv studios. Thank you, gentlemen, very much for your time this evening. So I assume that you and our viewers can already guess today's topic. How come Jerusalem Day and the flag march become such an explosive barrel? So before we dive into the debate, let's take a closer look in the following report by our I-24 News international affairs correspondent Batya Leventhal.
Jerusalem has always been a divided city, but prior to the Six-Day War, that division was literal. On the 7th of June 1967, or the 28th of Iyar in the Hebrew calendar, the Israeli army reunified Jerusalem, capturing it from Jordan during the Six-Day War. It marked the first time in 28 years that East Jerusalem and West Jerusalem became one city, and the first time since the Roman Empire that the city was fully under Jewish control.
We have returned to the holiest of our holy places, never to part from it again. We did not come to Jerusalem for the sake of other people's holy places, and not to interfere with the adherents of other faiths, but in order to safeguard its entirety, and to live there together with others in unity.
The anniversary of Jerusalem's reunification has since become a national holiday in Israel and is celebrated every year mainly by national religious Jews with a flag march through the Old City. It's a highly charged event. Jews believe they liberated Jerusalem, while Palestinians believe the city was occupied. These two opposing views clash, often literally. The route in which the flag marchers take to get to the Western Wall and Temple Mount compound in the Old City usually goes through the Muslim quarter, which only fuels the tension.
As we mark Jerusalem Day, various events will take place, including the traditional flag parade that will take place on its regular route. Waving the Israeli flag in the capital of Israel should go without saying. So we are clear on the matter. I ask participants of the parade to celebrate responsibly and respectfully.
The incursions of the Zionist enemy and their march of the flags is like putting oil on the fire. The Palestinian people have mobilized to form a wall, preventing the Zionist enemy from carrying out its planned invasion of the Al-Aqsa Mosque. The resistance is prepared, finger on the trigger. The Zionist enemy will come to its senses and realize that it is provoking Muslims, which is also a provocation to the resistance.
Some Jews are permitted to visit the Temple Mount, holy to both Muslims and Jews on the holiday, a flashpoint visit that is usually cut short by an outbreak of violence. While Jerusalem Day is not celebrated by most secular Israelis, it remains a national holiday, and Jerusalem continues to be a contested issue.
So, dear panelists, you know the rules. You each get 30 seconds to lay out your initial stance on the issue, and we'll pick up the debate after. So let's begin by asking, a sovereign state walking on eggshells like this, is it a sign of weakness or strength? Dr. Goldberg, please, the floor is yours.
Most definitely a sign of weakness. Sovereignty does not require such proofs of strength or such deployment of troops. The fact that Israel has to resort to such deployment, the fact that Israel tolerates this display of hatred and violence and vandalism, the fact that Israel places tens of thousands of people under a curfew to let this march progress through the Old City can't be anything but a demonstration of weakness.
And we will put a stop right there and pick up the discussion in a second. Mohammad Najib, your take?
Yes. Only Israel and the elected American President Donald Trump consider Jerusalem reunified or united. The Palestinians and the international law consider occupied, and the dangers of such marches if transferring this conflict from political conflict to be religious conflict over Jerusalem.
Great, and last but definitely not least, Hananya Naftali, please.
Thank you, Ellie. I have to say that this policy of containing is a mistake. We should not contain. We should show them an iron fist, these radicals, because I have to say that a flag is a powerful symbol of identity, and waving the flag of Israel is a powerful statement of democracy, freedom, liberty, human rights. So, of course, it will offend radical Palestinians. Let it offend them. We will continue to bring more light and drive darkness out of here.
Well, and from this point onwards, gentlemen, please feel free to interact respectfully. Obviously, I don't even need to mention that. So let's begin the conversation by referring to what we've heard from Internal Security Minister Omer Bar-Lev just short weeks ago. He said that it is all becoming a choice between the lesser of two evils. Is there a win here at some point, in some capacity, Dr. Goldberg?
Of course, there's a win-win here. And the whole situation where this march is presented as a human right, or as Hananya just said, a demonstration of light is, in my opinion, preposterous. This is a provocation. And if it's not a provocation, it's a demonstration of hate. That's all it is. It achieves nothing. It has no link whatsoever to Jewish traditions. It's a sectorial holiday. Your reporter was honest enough to say that most Israelis do not see this as a national holiday. It is one by law only. There's absolutely no reason for the state to condone the hatred and the violence that we see here that are all, according to the images that are coming from Jerusalem, all very much one-sided and coming from the Jewish side.
Hananya, I know you have something to say.
This parade should be canceled.
Hananya.
I have to say that the words of Ori are ridiculous. And this is just shameful to hear that coming from an Israeli, because I think that this parade is not a demonstration of hate. It's a demonstration of peace. I participated in this parade. I did not chant death to Arabs. I did not hate. I do not hate Palestinians.
Did you hear the songs? What are you talking about? There's a reality in place. Did you see the images? Did you hear the songs? Did you hear thousands of young people chant death to Arabs? Did you hear them singing about Shuafat on fire, referring to the death of Muhammad Abu Khdeir? Did you hear all of that?
I did not interrupt you. I did not interrupt you. I would love to finish my quick point. I just have to say that I think that focusing on the radical part is not the full image. Yes, there is radicalism. Chanting death to Arabs is absurd, and it is hate. I condemn it. As an Israeli Jew, I do not hate Arabs. I do not hate Palestinians.
Would you show an iron fist to the Jewish radicals as well? Do
absolutely,
that, and I'll be persuaded of your
absolutely, absolutely, and I'll go in even further, and I'll tell you that I got questions. People ask me, "What is your opinion if there is a police officer that uses unproportional force against Jews or against Arabs? It should be equal. If someone takes the law into their own hands, they should pay the price for that." But presenting the Jerusalem Day March, a march of peace, a march of freedom, since when are we not allowed to march with the flag of Israel in our own capital? This is ridiculous. The fact that Israelis cannot march with the Israeli flag in their capital is ridiculous.
Yes, Dr. Goldberg, please.
Hatred.
Yeah, please, Dr. Goldberg.
Allow this hatred. That's when you're not allowed to march with flags. When you have to put tens of thousands of people under curfew for this display of hatred and violence and bigotry. It shames me as a Jew that this parade is presented as something that Jews do.
But you know
I'm proud to march out of love for the country, not out of hate for Arabs. I love Arabs.
Oh, right. That's very apparent in the images of a young religious man spraying an old Palestinian woman with pepper spray. That's very apparent. The love for the country and the peace and the light. Hatred and violence and bigotry, and shame to me as a Jew to see these images of Jews performing all of this in Jerusalem. Jerusalem is my capital, and I refuse to have this display of bigotry and hatred represent me in any way.
I'm sorry that our Palestinian friend here doesn't have time. I do want to hear his opinion, but Ori, you could be a fantastic CNN reporter. So thank you so much for these
Okay, let's...
You could be an excellent Fox News commentator.
That's a good time to ask for Mohammad Najib to join the conversation. And Mohammad, I must ask you, we're hearing Hamas spokesperson Fawzi Barhoum. We're zooming out of the internal Israeli discourse, which is important, and we'll get back to it shortly. But he's saying our campaign for Jerusalem and Al-Aqsa is holy and open. We will not stop until the achievement of our people's goals, liberation, return to the establishment of a Palestinian state with Jerusalem as its capital. So do you think it will be fair to say that it's not this or that action on behalf of Israel, it's not this or that march that ignites or quote-unquote provokes certain reaction? The goal that is being illustrated on the Palestinian side here is very clear, a complete liberation, so to speak, of Jerusalem.
Jerusalem and Al-Aqsa Mosque are very sensitive issues for the Palestinians, for the Muslims. Therefore, Hamas tries to show itself as a protector of Al-Aqsa, defender of Al-Aqsa, so that's give them popularity and credibility and support among Palestinians. And this is also justify what they are calling for. But over sovereignty today, I feel pity toward the Israeli police, as 3,000 policemen were deployed to secure the march in Jerusalem, which is 10% of the total Israeli police force. And all the Palestinians know and aware that this Naftali Bennett fragile government tries to please the Israeli extremist right-wing groups by giving concessions and allow them to go to Al-Aqsa, to do in East Jerusalem. 3 weeks ago, they didn't allow Ben Gvir to march toward the Damascus Gate, Bab al-Amud, and others. But today, the fragile Israeli governments try to please them and to allow them to do that. And what is going and what is happening, it will not change the reality that the East Jerusalem is an occupied part of the Palestinian lands.
But Mr. Najib, if the route of the flag march was to be changed, not going through this the Muslim quarter, do you think we would see a different reaction? We wouldn't have seen Palestinians throwing stones at security forces. My question is, would an Israeli action change the reaction on the Palestinian side?
Well, when the Israeli security commanders or politicians behave discreetly and wisely and don't allow the provocation to take place, then there is no need for clashes and for violence. I don't think the Palestinians seek violence and come to West Jerusalem to initiate violence, but the way that they launched that and lobbying for that, and what we see this morning, the raids to Al-Aqsa Mosque and they try to pray there, which is not allowed for Jews to pray inside Al-Aqsa, and slogans, what they see on the social media. So that, in front of this provocation, the Palestinians and Hamas, the Fatah, everyone, all the Palestinian factions, the groups, and people will not keep silent, and they think they are targeted, and they try to defend themselves, their sacrificed mosque, the city that they want to be.
We're nearing our break, and Dr. Goldberg, very, very briefly, do you think that it is about the route? If the route was different, a different reaction was to be expected? Really briefly, please.
I think so. I think the march through the Muslim quarter is an intentional provocation, but I have to say that my anger at this parade doesn't have to do with the route and the clashes with the Palestinians. It has to do with the hate that I saw all day coming from the marchers. That is what shames me.
And we will pick up the debate from this point exactly right after the break, as we try to figure out when did Jerusalem stop being a consensus, so to speak, among Israelis. Many more questions right after the break. Our panelists will stay with us. You should too. We're back in. Before we dive back into the debate, let's take a brief look at some of the main remarks made by the main players today.
On Jerusalem Day, we mark not only the unity of our capital, but also the unity of our people. On this day, we pledge Jerusalem will never be divided again, and the people of Israel will never be divided again.
Jerusalem above, to which we aspire, is a city of tolerance, peace, and harmony. The city of righteousness. The bridge between Jerusalem below and Jerusalem above is linked to the intensity of our confidence in our eternal connection to this place. in our sensitivity towards the other, in the mosaic of people that live here.
I came to reinforce the security forces, and I'm waiting for the police to maintain order on the Temple Mount. Police must detain and expel those who insult Jews and racist slurs and throw stones. I'm waiting for the police to use force. I was shocked to see dozens of people running towards me, shouting, but of course I didn't move. I told them, the people of Israel live.
So, gentlemen, I would like to start the debate. I'm actually very curious to get your take on that. Someone brought to my attention a very interesting analogy that those who claim that the flag march going through the Muslim quarter is a provocation should also believe that the pride parade through a conservative town is a provocation. And we all know, if we're being fair, that this is not the social dichotomy, so to speak, in these cases. So my question to you, maybe it's not about value-based principles, but rather politics. Dr. Goldberg.
It's always about politics, but politics are not detached from values. The example that you brought, that I've also heard frequently over the last few days, is indeed ridiculous, because in order for there to be an analogy, then the straight towns through which gay pride marchers march should be under gay occupation with basic civil rights denied to the straight inhabitants. It's always about politics, but it's also about inequality. And also, I have to say, with a lot of respect to Mohammad Najib in Ramallah, this is also an intra-Jewish debate. This is about what sort of Judaism Israel wants to have as a Jewish state. I have a vision of Judaism that differs greatly from the one that I believe Hananya has, and it differs tremendously from the one I've already seen the marchers through Jerusalem have.
And in this respect, I will echo your message here, Dr. Goldberg. Hananya, when did Jerusalem stop being an Israeli consensus? Maybe it became too sectarian. Maybe it was, and I will try to phrase it mildly, to an extent hijacked by political sectors.
That's a great question. I think we're all asking this question ourselves, but I think that what we should ask ourselves is, why does the Jerusalem March need so many police officers protecting the Jewish people who are marching through the old city? You know, and there is not a single word about the Palestinians that are using the Temple Mount, using the Al-Aqsa Mosque as a base from which they conduct attacks on Jewish worshippers and on people. I myself visited the Temple Mount, not to provoke, to see the ground on which the two temples stood thousands of years ago, long before the Al-Aqsa Mosque was built, actually. And I saw stones were thrown at me. The Waqf were looking at me, and if Jewish people were only opening their lips, but they would film it and they would report it to the police. And I think that this is just absurd to see this difference. How Jewish worshippers visit the Temple Mount, they take off their shoes out of respect for this holy ground, and then you see radical Palestinians that ruin it for peaceful Muslim worshippers. They enter the Al-Aqsa Mosque with shoes on. They store rocks inside the Al-Aqsa Mosque. And I have to say, Ali, last time I checked, I didn't see Jews storing rocks in synagogues. I didn't see Christians breaking windows in their churches. And you know what? I didn't see Muslims in the UAE, Bahrain, and Saudi Arabia using the holiest site, the holiest mosque in their country, as a base from which they attack people. And if a Muslim would do that in these countries, I think they would hang him upside down.
Mohammed, your thoughts?
Yes, the Palestinians are deeply concerned that Israel is aiming to divide Al-Aqsa Mosque, as it did with the Ibrahimi Mosque in Hebron.
But those claims that there's an attempt to violate the status quo have been dismissed time and again on behalf of Jerusalem. But I would ask for your comment on what Hananya said. We do not hear inner Palestinian voices criticizing the violence that perhaps is accurately put, ruining it to an extent to other peaceful Muslim worshippers.
I don't think that the Palestinians should attack the Israeli Jews who come as a tourist to Al-Aqsa to see this holy place without any kind of a provocation or kind of praying there. And I think also majority of Palestinians don't treat guests in this way. But what's going through the social media and what the inciting and saying they want to do and to slaughter animals and to this is belong to them and to demolish the Dome of the Rock. So that's make the atmosphere is poisoned and a lot of things. And the extremists also, as they are extremists on the Jewish and the Israeli side, there's also on the Palestinian side the extremists who find an opportunity to incite people, to push people to react. But the majority wants that wise leaders overcome this problem and without keep the mosque for the Muslims to pray during Ramadan, during Fridays, during the other days, without any restrictions. And I don't think that the Palestinians always came there just to throw stones and rocks on the Israelis. And it's unacceptable from a holy place to practice these behaviors against visitors, no matter they are Jews or they are foreigners or whoever.
Well, unfortunately, we're nearing the end of our debate, gentlemen, so I would like to ask you to comment perhaps on the same topic, but 2 bullet points, let's put it that way. We're talking about how volatile the situation here is, but perhaps it is all masking the truth, which is Jerusalem may de facto be united, but in reality, in practice, this is not the case. And maybe it's also us to blame for teasing, for leading up to this potential security escalation and diverting the conversation from what's actually happening on the ground. Hananya.
Well, I think that this status quo and this problem was created with the peace treaty with Jordan. It was created and we have allowed it. You know, we have said when we liberated the Temple Mount, the Temple Mount is in our hands. I think that some Israelis would say that the Temple Mount is not in our hands if Jews are treated this way when going on the holiest site in Judaism. It is the 3rd holiest site in Islam, and we respect that. You know, when I visited the Sheikh Zayed Mosque in Abu Dhabi, there was no problem. No one spit at me. No one threw rocks at me. I wore my kippah. And going up on Temple Mount, you know, as a Jew, I'm hated for this. So I think that this is just preposterous. And the point that I want to put emphasis on is that these radicals are not Muslims. They hate Israel more than they love their own people and their own mosque. And as someone who cares for the Palestinians and who loves Palestinians, I will do whatever I can to expose the corrupt Palestinian leaders and to bring about peace and democracy to the Palestinian people.
Dr. Goldberg, I simply know you have something to say about that.
I'm not at all surprised to see that Hananya answered none of your questions, but had a lot of grades to give to the Palestinians. The reality on the ground is that Jerusalem has not been united basically since 1967. And the situation is, I fear, getting worse. It's not wholly Israel's fault. The violence is not exclusively Jewish, nor is it exclusively Palestinian. But the lack of respect and the inability to understand the complexity of the situation, accompanied by such hollow slogans as it's a problem of the peace treaty with Jordan, as well as basic ignorance of Jewish law, which still today prohibits Jews from going up the Temple Mount. This idea that worshipping on the Temple Mount is a basic Jewish ritual or rite is just completely out of touch, both with Jewish history and with Jewish law. This approach that is very aggressive, that seeks combat, and I'm using this word intentionally, can only lead to bad things. An attempted dialogue would probably serve all sides much better.